Good afternoon. This is the welcome all to the planning meeting on the Thursday, the 12th of December. Before I start the meeting, just a brief comment from myself. Just to remind members of the committee that we did have some training last week where it was explained very clearly about what matters should and shouldn't be discussed in a planning meeting. We should, as this is a quasi-judicial meeting, we should only stick to matters that are relevant to the planning application rather than bring in extraneous matters. So having said that, may I remind everyone present that the meeting is being live streamed as well as recorded via the internet, and this recording archived for future viewing. If a participant wishes to speak, can they please raise their hand in person if sat in the chamber, or use the remote raise hand function. When invited to address by myself, please could all participants ensure that their microphone and camera is on to ensure that they can be both seen and heard when actively participating. And please ensure that all debate is raised verbally and not via the chat function for the sake of the recording. So please could I welcome all committee and non-committee elected members, cabinet members, our officers, and also to anyone watching the live meeting broadcast and our registered speakers. There are a number of matters arising that have been communicated to members over the last few days, including today, which I hope you've all had a chance to read. But starting with the agenda, apologies for absence, please.
Chair, we've not had anything formally through as yet, so I don't know if members are able to share any apologies.
Do we have apologies for absence from any or communicated through any members? No? I see no hands. In that case, I'll take that. There's no apologies. Agenda item 2, minutes of the meeting held on the 17th of October 2024. Can I have someone move those?
Happy to move.
Thank you, Councillor Hodges.
And happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Agenda item 3, to receive declarations of interest and the nature of such interests under the Council's Code of Conduct, including whipping. Do we have any declarations of interest on any of the items that are coming up this afternoon? Again, I see no hands. In that case, moving on to...
Not true. I just wanted some sort of guidance about the model farm. Bearing in mind we have stated views already about that. I'm just wondering whether we need to declare. So thank you.
As I understand it, this is kind of a continuation of the meetings that we attended previously. Therefore, any declarations we made at that meeting will be seen as read here. And if no declarations were made, that too was seen as read. But I would accept advice from legal if there's any available, please. James?
Hi, Chair. Yeah, I think you've summarised that correctly. I don't think there'd be a need for declarations of interest in relation to the previous consideration of the matter here, because it is a continuation of the same matter.
Thank you very much for that confirmation. Moving on, agenda item 4, site inspections. These are the ones from the previous meeting. Can someone, yeah, please, Nick.
Happy to note, Chairman.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Hodges. I'll second that.
And happy to second that.
Oh, there you go, Councillor Wilson has. Agenda item 5, building regs, applications and other building control matters determined by the Head of Sustainable Development under delegated powers. I'll move we note.
Second.
Thank you, Councillor Hodges. Agenda item 6, planning applications determined by the Head of Sustainable Development under delegated powers. Again, I'll move we note. Second. Thank you, Councillor Hodges. Agenda item 7, appeals. Sarah Feist, please.
Hello, Chair. That's just for members to note the report.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, yeah, the The appeals are all detailed within the report, so it's for noting unless there are any questions.
I move that we note that.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Thank you, Eddie, Councillor Williams. Right, agenda item 8, trees, the delegated list. Again, is for noting.
I move that we note.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. I'll second that. Agenda item 9, enforcement. And again, I think this is Sarah.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The report seeks authorisation to issue an enforcement notice in relation to the unauthorised change of use of units 3, 30 and 40 to 42. And they're currently used for purposes not permitted on the industrial estate. The permitted uses are B1, which is light industrial, and B8, which is storage and distribution. The business park comprises 42 units and is located off Hayes Lane in Barry. The site is also adjacent to a new housing development, which can be seen in the aerial photograph shown there in your presentation. So consent for the business park was granted in 2018 on the basis that the land was situated within a local employment allocation for these units, these uses, under policy MG9 of the LDP. The consent was therefore subject to a condition that the units were only used for B1 and B8 uses. The purpose of controlling the consent was to ensure that they fulfilled the local employment requirements for uses falling within classes B1 and B8. So as a result of the investigation that we've undertaken, a number of the units were identified as being used for purposes other than B1 and B8. All of the occupiers have been written to and given the opportunity to apply for planning permission in order to regularise the unauthorised uses. So as detailed in the report, planning consents have been granted in relation to 2 specific units within the business park, and these are units 21, which has been approved for a cafe, and unit 29, which has been approved for B2 use, which is general industrial. Other units operating in breach of the condition have also since been resolved by reverting back to the B1 and B8 uses. More recent inspections in May and October this year have confirmed that 3 units remain operating in breach of the condition. And that's unit 3, which is being used as a stonemason. I think we have pictures of the 3 uses. So unit 3 being used as a stonemason, that's the right-hand picture. Unit 30 being used as a gym and fitness centre, so that's the top left-hand picture. And units 40 to 42, which is being used as a brewery and bar, which is the bottom left-hand photograph. And this has also been issued with a licence for alcohol consumption on the premises. So the main issue in considering the expediency of enforcement action is the potential detrimental impacts on residential and public amenity resulting from uncontrolled uses within the business park. As there are now residential dwellings in close proximity to the site, any adverse impacts on residential amenity would be contrary to policies of the LDP and unacceptable. Although the introduction of uses other than B1 and B8 at the business park may be acceptable, subject to planning controls, in the absence of suitable applications being submitted, the council has not had the opportunity to determine whether these other uses are acceptable. If no action were to be taken, any one of these uncontrolled uses could become lawful after 10 years and immune from enforcement action. A further issue is that if any of the uses were to become lawful, they would effectively be no control over the units within an allocated employment site. Although policies MD 14 and 16 of the LDP are generally supportive of complementary uses, there have been no planning applications submitted for units 3, 30 and 40 to 42, which would have enabled the planning merits to be assessed. So it's therefore considered expedient to take enforcement action in this case to enable control to be maintained over the uses of these units, so as not to undermine the purpose of the local employment site which would be contrary to policy MG9 of the LDP. So it's therefore recommended that a breach of condition enforcement notice is authorised, and that would be to secure full compliance with the requirements of condition 6 on the planning consent, and that would require the uses of units 3, 30 and 40 to 42 to cease other than uses falling within B1 and B8. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Sarah. I noticed earlier that Councillor Payne, you had your hand up. Was there a reason for that? Councillor Payne?
Hi, yeah, Chair. It was just your microphone sound was very low.
Okay.
But I put it in the chat, so
I'll move it closer.
yeah, it was just really low. Thanks.
Thank you for that. Right, any questions or anything on the enforcement notice? Councillor Johnson.
Sorry, I'm going to speak in English on this one. Just to clarify then, the reason for bringing this enforcement forward is that the 3 units which are mentioned here have not yet brought forward planning applications to vary the uses, and this is therefore a method of ensuring that they do so, because those which have been brought forward have so far been agreed. That's not to say that these would necessarily be agreed if they brought them forward, but in the absence of an application, we are taking enforcement. I do, on that basis, I happily move the action that we take enforcement. I do note that one of these is a brewery, and some of the pictures of the brewery look quite familiar. Is this the brewery that Rishi Sunak attended while he was Prime Minister without them having the correct planning permissions in place? A bit embarrassing for the former Prime Minister, I'm sure. Thank you.
I'm not sure whether it is or not, but certainly it is a brewery that's acting as a bar as well. I'm assured, because I have asked the question, that they are licensed, but they don't have planning permission as such. Councillor Wilson, you have your hand up, and thank you for the movement.
Thank you very much. Yeah, and in what relation to the actual brewery, it's quite a well-known brewery within these parts, as many of us probably know. I did think it was interesting that they have opening hours as well on that industrial complex, and I just wondered how much discussions have we had, because clearly, you know, they haven't exactly been quiet as a business, and I'm just wondering what sort of discussions we've been having with them.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Sarah?
Yes, I would say that we have been investigating a number of breaches on a number of the units, as detailed in the report. With the brewery, obviously there have been quite a lot of officers' discussions with them, with a view to regularising the breach, and in particular with the brewery, concerns exist over potential odours from the brewery, which could have a harmful impact on residential property. So there have been extensive discussions, and as I've said earlier in the presentation, we have invited planning applications in each case, but in the absence of those, you know, our only option is to recommend enforcement action. So the discussions have been undertaken over the last 2 years.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Councillor Wilson?
Yeah, I'd say I'm happy to support such action. Hopefully to just bring these people to the table, to be honest.
Yeah. Councillor Drake?
I'm more than happy, as is in my ward, I'm more happy to support this.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions from members of the committee? No, that's been moved and supported by Councillor Wilson, Councillor Johnson, and Councillor Wilson, and Councillor Drake. Anybody opposed to the enforcement action? I see no hands, therefore that is supported. Move on then to agenda item 10, which is the planning applications. As I said earlier, there have been a considerable number of matters arising that have been communicated to members of the committee. We also have a number of speakers, I believe 5 on the Little application and 1 on the St George's application. Can I ask Rob Lancashire then please to introduce the planning application 2022-00907, oblique full land at Bridge House Farm, Llanmaes Road, Llantwit Major. Thank you, Rob. We can't hear you, Rob. Is your muting on? Nope. Lucky I can read lips.
She's just left, Chair, so you'll be rejoining. Okay. Just let committee know Rob has just left. He's rejoined now. Rob, can we try you again, please? No, still no sound, Rob. Might have to remove your headphones and then rejoin and try it through your audio on your computer.
Just take him off his head. He didn't take him off his head.
Hi, Rob. Can we try you again now?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Yeah, you're coming through loud and clear.
Brilliant.
Thanks,
Okay,
Rob.
marvellous. Marvellous. Okay, as the chair just advised, members are advised a number of matters arising have been received and circulated, including those from the agent in support of the application and circa 50 further representations with broadly 10 objections, 3 letters of comment and the remainder in support. They will circulate to members. Members are also advised that a further 8 representations in support of the application were received after the deadline today and have not been circulated, obviously, because they came in after the matters arising deadline. But members are advised they raise similar sentiments and nothing substantially new to those points raised, either within those representations received with the original application or subsequently in the matters arising. Okie dokie. So, as you can see on the plan before you, the application site lies adjacent to the junction of Llanmaes Road and the Llantwit Major Bypass, the B4265, outside of the settlement boundary as identified by the adopted Vale of Glamorgan Local Development Plan, and as such falls within the countryside. It is not allocated for development within the plan. It is, however, noted that the Llantwit Major settlement boundary runs along the southern edge of the adjacent bypass, whilst the edge of the village of Llanmaes is circa 150 metres from the site at its nearest point to the north. Next slide, please. The application has been submitted in full and relates to the development of the site for the erection of a Class A1 food store with access, surface level parking, landscaping and all associated development. The proposed food store would have a floor space of circa 2,000 square metres with an indicated retail floor space of 1,250 square metres. The proposed store would have a maximum width of circa 78 metres and a depth of approximately 32 metres, inclusive of the canopy area to the front. Next slide, please. The buildings would have a monopitch roof design with a ridge height of 7 metres, but a maximum height of circa 8 to 8.5 metres above existing ground floor levels towards the north of the site, noting the levels difference across the site and the provision of a level floor area. The site layout would accommodate access from Llanmaes Road to the east and a 117 bay parking area to the front of the store with a servicing area for delivery vehicles to the north. This is slightly different than the officer report, which notes 122, which is an error on my part. The application has been supported by a retail assessment that seeks to identify the qualitative, quantitative and sequential assessment with regard to headroom for retail capacity within the primary catchment area, and also that the proposals would not cause unacceptable detriment to vitality and viability of businesses within the Llanthwaite major town centre. These matters are discussed in detail within the officer report, and I won't dwell on these too much here. However, in summary, following assessment of the supporting details, the council's appointed retail consultants and officers advise that the retail policy requirements, including that of policy MG13 and planning policy Wales, have largely been met. As such, officers do not wish to contend whether capacity exists for development of this form within the area, and this has been apportioned weight within consideration of this planning application. Consideration has also been given to a number of other matters, including ecology, green infrastructure, drainage, and impacts on neighbouring properties, whilst the applicant has agreed to Section 106 contributions in line with the Council's adopted SPG and LDP policies. These sectors have been found to be acceptable as detailed within the officer report. It's also noted that a number of representations raised concern with regard to highways implications of the proposals. Following extensive consultation with the Council's highway development section, including consideration of vehicular trips associated with the development, including those through the village of Llanmaes, they raised no objection to the proposals, subject to various highways improvements, including localised widening to the front of the store, active travel measures, an additional crossing point across the mouth of Llanmaes Road, amended telematics of the lights at the junction, and further details subject to condition. So from highways perspective, it was considered to be acceptable. Next slide, please. However, as noted previously, the site lies to the northern edge of the B4265 and to the west of Llanmaes Road. As existing, the site is a grass field parcel that benefits from vegetative boundaries, with a field hedge to the east and western boundaries, and an existing vehicular entrance from Llanmaes Road to the east. The southern boundary with the B4265 is demarcated by an overgrown field hedge set below the level of the road, with mature lime trees to the southeastern corner adjacent to the junction of the B4265 and Llanmaes Road. These features generally offer limited screening benefits, as those who attended the site visit this morning would have been able to see. As you can see from the aerial photograph before you, although there is some loose-knit development to the north of the B4265, it's considered there is very clear distinction between this and the more dense suburban form within Llanthwaite Major's more northern suburbs, as evident from the photograph before you, with the site edge red, or shaded red, sorry. There's a clear distinction between the form and density of development between the north and south of the road, with development to the south of the road urban and close-knit, with a significantly more rural and undeveloped character to the northern side. Next slide, please. As detailed in depth within the officer report, the introduction of a building of this form and scale will represent a significant urbanising presence that would be detrimental to the character of the countryside. They'll be further combined by the parking area, lighting and other paraphernalia associated with the development of this form, including likely scope for future advertisements that would be subject to further applications in the future, so they do not form part of this application. Furthermore, the proposals result in an appreciable closing of the already modest gap between Llanthwaite Major and Llanmaes that will result in a confluence between the settlements. This would not be in officers' view, this would not be suitably mitigated by existing or proposed landscaping that form part of the proposals, nor by the suggested material palette that seeks to utilise darker cladding to reduce the building's prominence. Although noting the lack of specific landscape designation, the site is considered sensitive in terms of its land and townscape qualities, providing a clear distinction between Llanmaes and Llanthwaite Major and the rural environs of the former. The proposals are considered to be a harmful, urbanising form of development, be detrimental to the character of the countryside and distinction between identified settlements. In officers' view, this would represent a significant detriment arising from the proposals and would weigh heavily against them. Having balanced all of the material issues, whilst it is noted that the retail headroom and retail impact have been addressed within the submission and found to be broadly in compliance with a relevant policy framework, it's considered that the visual impacts of a development are a significant material consideration that weigh against the development even. Just for context, sorry, I forgot this slide was here. You can see here the massing from the LVIA that's been provided, showing the building in situ, with the hedge to be translocated back behind the footway proposed. I think that growth of circa five years, again, it demonstrates that the building would be of an appreciable presence. Anyway, so as I mentioned, the visual impact of the proposals are considered to weigh heavily against the application, and as such, officers recommend the application should be refused. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rob. As I mentioned earlier, we have a number of speakers. Excuse me. The first speaker is Mr. Darren Green, who objects to the application. Mr. Green. Your time will start when you start.
Councillors, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak today as a representative of the Clonmice Residents Group. We want to express our gratitude to the Planning Officer and his colleagues for the thorough and balanced consideration of Lidl's planning application. We fully support the recommendation to refuse Lidl's application for a new store on the edge of our village. This application fundamentally conflicts with the Council's local development plan policies MD1, MD2 and MD8, as the site lies outside the settlement boundary of Lantwick Major within the countryside, where its development would significantly harm the rural character of the area, negatively impacting the landmice conservation area and the historical nature of the village. The introduction of a large-scale supermarket along with associated parking and lighting would create a visually intrusive urban feature, blurring the distinct identities of Clonmice and Lantwick Major, contrary to Welsh Government policy. If approval was granted, it risks opening the floodgates to further development along the B4265, leading to the inevitable coalescence of Clonmice with Lantwick Major. Many Clonmice homes would experience increased noise and light pollution, especially in the winter when the glow from the building, car park and vehicles would be impossible to ignore. Traffic safety remains a critical concern. While much attention has been given to the B4265 junction, the inevitable increase in traffic through the narrow lanes of Clonmice, which often lack pavements and can suffer from flooding, has been totally overlooked. We therefore fear for the safety of pedestrians, cyclists and those riding horses through the village. We note the Council commissioned a report from Nexus Planning which states that just Philco alone will lose around 1/3 of their annual turnover, which surely can only mean local job losses and thereby negating any claim of local employment gain in the Lidl application. The Planning Authority's report states that the development would result in, and I quote, a significant urbanising presence that would fundamentally alter the character of the area. We would remind the committee that a green wedge designation for this field is currently being considered under the RLDP. Supporting the officer's recommendation to refuse this application and safeguarding this land as a green wedge would send a strong message about protecting rural communities like Clonmice from inappropriate and unsustainable development in the future. The residents of Clonmice, who have been under considerable stress during the 2-year planning process, urge you to support the Planning Officer's recommendation to refuse this application to protect the rural identity and historic character of Clonmice, the vibrancy of Lantwick Major Town Centre, and the safety and well-being of our residents for generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Green. If you just stay there a moment while I see if there are any members who want to ask you any points of clarification on what you said. Again, I see no hands, so no points of clarification. Thank you, Mr. Green. Next on my list of speakers is Councillor Gwyn John, who is an elected member on the council. Gwyn?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'd like to thank the members who came to Landmace this morning, I should say, and saw exactly the location of this proposed development. It's in the boundary of Landmace Parish. It is not part of Lantwick Major, as many people seem to think. And it's very clear the application does not meet the policies of MD1, MD2 and MD8 of the LDP. And I must thank the officer for an excellent report that he's produced in this respect. We must remember that Sainsbury's attempted to build here previously, but they withdrew their application. I was absolutely amazed that Lidl came along and thought they could do better. It's very clear and recognised by many that this application is again made in the wrong place. and another location should be found elsewhere. Members this morning saw the huge amount of traffic using the narrow Landmace Road in and out of the village. I disagree with the Highways Department on the fact that whilst they were planning to widen the entrance to the proposed site, when you go down into Landmace, as Mr. Green has just told you, it's extremely narrow. And lorries and all sorts of vehicles bombing through Landmace, and they do. 20 miles an hour means nothing in Landmace. It will absolutely cause chaos. And there's a lot of elderly people living in Landmace, and you must take their views into consideration of the narrow roads and some with no pavements. Opposite the proposed site, there is a riding school. And quite simply, the riding club based there throughout the summer months, spring, summer, early autumn, they have many events. They have a large number of members going there with horses going out onto the road. And also clubs come there with their various competitions. Again, directly opposite a proposed site for Lidl's. It's an accident waiting to happen. And it's totally out of context with the area that this site should even be considered for a supermarket. If it is allowed, the application will have a huge impact on the established premises in Lantford Major Town Centre. And I'm not talking necessarily only about the supermarkets. I'm talking about all the premises that are established in Lantford Major. And I brought this in my comments to the application, quoting MG13. The corner shop at nearby Crochet Drive would go the same way. That could close straight away, as it's only around about 300, 400 yards from the proposed application site. The highway network would impact on biodiversity and impact on the residents of Landmace. Lidl's need to find another suitable site away from Landmace. And I urge the planning members this afternoon to support the officer's recommendation and refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor John. Are there any points of clarification based on what Councillor John has said? Again, I see no hands. In that case, I'll call on our next speaker, and that's Councillor Sally Hanks.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say that thanks to the letter that Lidl posted to residents in Lanswit, but did not post to residents in Landmace, that I've received approximately 200 emails. The vast majority of these emails have been in support of planning permission to be given to Lidl. It's fair to say that numerous emails point out how nice the design of the Lidl development is in comparison to the design allowed recently on the Eagleswell site. Residents also say this Lidl store will give local employment, reduce travelling to Barry Bridge End, and will offer much needed competition on prices. I think Lantwit Major would benefit greatly from this supermarket. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hanks. Are there any points of clarification for Councillor Hanks? Again, I see no... Oh, there's Councillor Wilson. You have your hand up. It's a point of clarification.
Yes, point of clarification. Is competition a valid point?
If it's clarification from me, then no, it's market forces, and it's not necessarily a valid point in all cases. There can be special cases, but generally speaking, no. If there are no other points of clarification, we'll move on to our next speaker, who is Councillor Graham Smith of Llanmaes.
So I'm here to share the views of Llanmaes Community Council, within whose area this proposal is entirely located, on behalf of our residents. This application is, from a planning perspective, absurd, and from an environmental perspective, questionable. I'd like to thank the planning officers for the job they've done evaluating the proposal, and also endorse their recommendation that the application be refused. To paraphrase the officer's report, the proposal is unacceptable because of all of the following: the countryside location, the design of the proposed superstore with 117 car parking spaces in what would become concreted over green fields, the stark form of the proposed store and associated structures, and finally, the sheer scale of the development. It would certainly not be a small supermarket catering mostly to the needs of locals travelling to the site either on foot, bicycle, or using local public transport. There are no fewer than 4 local planning guidelines and 2 national planning guidelines that this proposal contravenes. This large-scale development, if implemented, would immediately and plainly make an unacceptable contribution to the physical coalescence and the visual coalescence of the distinct settlements of Llanmaes and Llantwit Major. There would also be a significantly negative and detrimental impact on the setting of the Llanmaes Conservation Area, as is clearly outlined in the Conservation Area Appraisal and Management Plan. And this plan was in existence when I moved to the area in the 1990s. Degradation of a conservation area is not a desirable planning outcome ever. From a Llanmaes perspective, I'd also point out that the highway improvements are wholly located to the south of the development, between the Llantwit Major bypass and the store entrance. It is assumed that most extra traffic generated will approach the store from just one direction. The proposed access to the site is essentially through the current field entrance. A few years ago, Sainsbury's wanted to develop this site and proposed a new roundabout for the B4265. Environmentally, we note the effort to highlight the supposed green credentials of the proposal. I do wonder, though, whether the applicant would be so keen to proceed with this development if it was associated with 17 car parking spaces instead of 117. The idea of an out-of-centre development in the 2020s is retrograde. There are better options and, more importantly, better processes than a speculative and unnecessarily aggressive planning application for addressing the retail needs of the residents of the coastal settlements in the Western Vale of Glamorgan. Thank you.
Well timed. Any points of clarification for Councillor Smith? Again, I see no hands. In that case, we move on to our next speaker, who is Mr. Rob Mitchell, who is agent for the application. Mr. Mitchell.
Good evening, councillors. Noswaith dda. My name is Rob Mitchell. I'm the planning agent for the application. I'd like to thank officers for their work and Rob Lancashire and his team for their report. Importantly, the report highlights that there are no technical planning objections outstanding, so you will appreciate there is wide agreement with officers on this application. There is, regrettably, one issue we have not been able to reach agreement on, and that is the suggested reason for refusal. As you will no doubt know in your role, good planning requires balance, and matters can be finely balanced. We respectfully disagree with officers and other speakers on their balance of the key issues here in reaching their conclusion. In our view, sufficient weight has not been given to the multitude of local economic benefits this development will bring to the people of Llantwit and its surrounds. The support of this application is testament to this. A key indicator of sustainability is a settlement's self-containment, the ability to adequately serve its inhabitants. Llantwit is not self-contained, but as one of the council's most important settlements, it is growing. Yet, the outflow of shopping and unnecessary travel from Llantwit is stark. For too long, people have been disadvantaged by the paucity of choice and competition available to them locally. Remember the pandemic. Food shopping is a basic necessity taken for granted. There is a proven need for this food store. In transport terms, the development can save shoppers a 20-mile day round trip in avoidable travel to Bridgend, Barry, Culverhouse Cross or elsewhere. Based on our retail analysis, the applicant is around 25% cheaper than existing options. Consider these reductions over the course of a year. It is not hyperbole that these savings in grocery costs, fuel, time, CO2 emissions will change people's everyday lives. The sustainable economic planning benefits of this proposal are paramount. Independent retail advice confirms, and it is common ground with your officers, that a need exists and there is no better site on which to meet it. In respect of safeguarding character, the site sits between the very urban form of the bypass and properties immediately north. The height of the building will reach 7 metres from finished floor level. This is comparable to a typical UK house. We are proud of what can be achieved on site through sensitive materials, including stone finish and a landscape design that will deliver significantly enhanced planting and prevent visual harm. What is planning for if it is not to deliver sustainable development and in doing so make people's lives better? Our view, and one we invite you to share, is that the merits of bringing this much needed development to the people of Llantwit and its surrounds weigh in favour of this application being granted. Thank you for your time. Diolch yn fawr.
Just gone over time. Are there any points of clarification for Mr. Mitchell from members of the committee? Again, I see no hands, none in the room. In that case, sorry, I see no hands for points of clarification. We'll move on to our next speaker, who is Mr. Ledwood, who is the applicant, speaking for the applicant. Mr. Ledwood.
Good afternoon, councillors. My name is George Ledwood and I'm the Regional Head of Property for Lidl. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today in support of the application. There is no doubt that members face a finely balanced decision today. There is an established need for an increased food provision within the town, and you must come to a judgment considering Lidl's proposal, which addresses the clear need and has significant local resident support versus the officer's recommendation. Understandably, your judgment will hang on whether allowing the development offers more benefit to local residents than any perceived harm. The first banner on the Vale of Glamorgan's website states, "Help with the cost of living." All households across Wales are significantly impacted by the ailing UK economy and energy crisis and the food price inflation, which has hit a 45-year high at 19% in March of 2023. The money in your pocket does not go as far as it did before. A community must provide an affordable food provision, which is what Lidl offers. Currently, the closest discounter is located in Bridgend. For households that seek affordable essentials, the development will result in saving in cost, time, fuel, and reduced CO2 emissions. It is no coincidence, therefore, that over 70% of local residents who have written in support the application. The proposed food store will provide up to 40 jobs and pay an industry-leading salary of £12.40 per hour, increasing with long service. Importantly, Lidl will recruit from within Llantwit Major. Lidl go further by continually developing our colleagues by offering them career opportunities at leadership positions, such as a store manager earning a potential salary of over £60,000. It's local jobs for local people. Working with the council, Lidl are proposing to upgrade pedestrian links, promoting active travel and improving the connectivity with Llantwit's town centre. A separate 106 contribution of over £85,000 is agreed and will provide even more active travel improvements, among other benefits. The Lidl discounter model provides a limited product range which satisfies all main basic shopping needs at excellent value for money. Consequently, Lidl's business model complements existing centres by not providing specialist products and encourages linked trips. Lidl invest in local Welsh producers to support their businesses, and we provide a constant revenue stream that enables us to work together to drive efficiencies and pass our savings on to our customers. Lidl was the first retailer to sign up to the Pembrokeshire Creamery to sell milk produced and bottled in Wales. So, to summarise, the key benefits to support Lidl's argument include the provision of a high-quality, affordable, accessible store convenient to local residents, the support of the significant majority of local residents, an enhanced consumer choice and competition, Lidl's first green roof in Wales, and the provision of local jobs. This afternoon, we invite you to make a decision for the benefit of Llanquit Major residents. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Ledward. Again, are there any points of clarification from members of the committee on what Mr. Ledward's? Councillor Wilson.
Yeah. What is the staff turnover rate amongst the shop assistants at Lidl?
So the staff turnover, ultimately, it's dependent on the existing store environment. We will always try and recruit from within locally, but you can't comment on people's individual circumstances as to why they leave a business.
Are there any other points of clarification? Mark, did you want to come back on that?
Yeah, I just know.
Thank you. In that case, sorry, Mark, you're back on screen. Is there a reason?
I'm just saying that the answer wasn't given, so that's my point.
Okay. Do you want to come off screen then, please, Councillor Wilson? Councillor Payne. Actually, before we go in, is this a point of clarification, Helen? Otherwise, Helen, you there?
Yeah.
It's a point of clarification.
I wasn't sure then I wasn't sure then if you said that you would use local producers. Is that correct?
So Lidl pride themselves on working with local suppliers to supply their food stores. We've got a really big campaign called, it escapes me off the top of my head. It's along the signs of Lidl for Wales, but it's a big Welsh campaign that we always work where we can with local suppliers, because ultimately that's what we are about. We are a British business. We want to support British communities, and the testament, honestly, the most recent commitment we have to local, especially in Wales, is the Pembrokeshire Creamery. But it's not just that's our investment. We've invested over 24 billion pounds by the end of 24 in British food and farming across the UK. So specifically to the Vale of Glamorgan, I cannot comment, but we will always try and supply local produce within an immediate vicinity of a food store.
Okay, yeah, that was going to be my next bit, was, is it going to be the Vale of Glamorgan? Thank you for your answer.
Thank you, Councillor Payne. Are there any other points of clarification? In that case, can I ask Rob to come back and respond to the points, any points raised during the speakers, from the speakers?
I don't really think I have any points to clarify from those. Thank you, Chair.
In that case, we can move to Ian Robinson.
Thanks, Chair. Just one point, and just as context, appreciate the applicant is Lidl, and not commenting on any of the kind of the specific points about Lidl's strategy and how Lidl run their business is. Just want members to be aware, for clarity, that the application is for a food store, not for a Lidl, and the planning system couldn't reasonably ensure that a store always remains a Lidl. So whilst members will take into account the material considerations as they see fit, things like affordability and cost of produce would not, in officers' view, be a fundamental kind of material consideration, because you can't guarantee that that's always going to be the provider. That's just the kind of the context I wanted to give to that point. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Ian. That's a timely reminder. In that case, we'll move now on to any discussion or debate. Are there any members of the committee who want to raise any points, ask questions of officers, or contribute to the discussion? Councillor Williams.
Chair, if I can reserve the right to speak at the end, just so I can hear what other people have said and make a judgment. You've heard, as a representative of Landwick Ward, and that includes Landmaze, I'm minded to give reasons for approval for this application. Clearly, I need to thank the officer for looking at all the aspects of it and all of the various points. And if you go through the report, I feel like I've written a 2-page response, but the arguments and discussions are quite clear. On the whole, the consultations didn't indicate any objections, none that could be overcome by some consideration as part of the report. And in the end, we've ended up, it's the applicant has revised their initial plans in an attempt to satisfy the planning requirements. And to some extent, you've got to say, green roofs, solar panels, looking at a bit of vegetation. So they've met all the requirements, particularly ecology, the archaeology, all those aspects which were a concern. There was a mention of the conservation area, and it is important to note that this development will not be within that conservation area, albeit it's 50 metres of water down the road. I've experienced myself that because it's not within the conservation area, any development can take place as long as it meets planning requirements, which this development does. The highways, that is a concern. However, the Highways Authority do not find, they recognise that works will be done, and therefore it meets the requirements, and there are no objections on that point. There was mention of the LDP, and it's interesting because, as we're aware, we're currently under an RLDP, so we're revising the LDP, and initial stages of looking at sites included this particular one, and it was down as retail. It's since been reassessed, and just so people are aware, that it's now down for housing. So whether you think this is going to stay in the countryside or not, the current direction of this piece of land is going to be urbanised. So I would suggest that we, Lantuit, the surrounding area, St Athan, have had sufficient development of housing to justify an increase in capacity of retail, and therefore this site in particular is ideal. I would have preferred the development to be away from this particular area, but unfortunately, when you look at the test, was it sequential test? You look at town centre first. There isn't, as the report says, there isn't anywhere within a town that can be utilised. So then you look at the edge of town, and it's almost a misnomer. If I cross the road and walk out of town, it is literally across a road, and we're asking for a shop, a development. So that was the first thing that struck me. The other thing was that we talked about the height of the development, and it's going to protrude onto the visual amenity. Well, Frolics across the road has got a barn, which is going to be just as high, if not the same, as this particular development. But it's acceptable because allegedly it's, a land, it's a rural, cultural building. So in my mind, you're going to end up with, and it did strike me as odd. I thought when I first heard it was a barn, I thought, so this is part of a farm that produces food, and here we've got a development that's going to sell it. I thought, well, what could you argue with? However, I recognise that that particular use across the road isn't for production. So I've talked about the LDP and the RLDP, so that's going on. And then when you talk about the other legislation, it's quite clear within the officer's report, and I was quite taken aback. There's quite a few pages of what the requirements are of the legislation. And through all of those, I was starting to think, okay, this isn't going to go through. But then when you look at those tests, the sequential tests, and particularly the retail need, the officer has accepted that it's not an unacceptable impact on the local town. There is, with the increase of the housing, there is sufficient capacity for this development to come through. It is an opinion, but that's my opinion. I will point out that you've heard that you've got ward members, one's for, one's against. Well, I'm for, based on the representation I've had in the last week alone, over 200, majority in the same as in the report, in the region of 75%, are in favour of it, because they're quite happy to cross the road. Okay, so I'll leave it at that. So it doesn't comply with policy. So I've mentioned it's been amended. I've mentioned the barn. The planning policies meets rural need. I've mentioned the conservation area, which I thought, oh, that's going to be a misnomer. That's going to stop it. Cost of living, sustainability. There are key factors for Clanton Major and Landmace to travel, as they are doing now, at least 30% of the population, which there is evidence of, going to other stores similar to this in Bridgend, Barry, and even Cardiff, isn't what I call a sustainable policy. So I think it's about time that, as we keep on talking, that we look at the impact of what we're doing on the environment. And this particular development answers those needs. If you say to me, on balance, waiting what it looks like compared to the rest of it, knowing full well what it looks like now at the moment, we can put mitigations in, such as trees and planting and whatever, just as they do with other developments, then I'm afraid that my balance of opinion is that this development should go for approval. And I would move that as a recommendation, Chair.
So, Councillor Williams, you've moved approval. Councillor Champion, your hand is up next.
Hello, and it seems that the planning officers are quite keen, and the government are keen to build houses everywhere, but they seem less keen to service those houses. And I just, there's a large development going on in St. Athan, another one on the way under the new LDP, and more in the rural area. There's going to be, along that corridor, there's going to be more houses. So I think they need to be serviced, and whether this is the right location, that's been looked at, and there aren't any alternatives. So surely, perhaps this is the place for it.
Thank you, Councillor Champion. Was that supporting the motion to approve?
Yes, I think I would second that.
Okay. Next speaker I have is Councillor Ian Johnson. Oh, sorry, Nick Hodges. Councillor Hodges.
Right. Thank you, Chairman. Interesting debate, and interesting to hear both sets of views. I was at the site visit this morning, and I found it very useful. I know the site, I know the area, but the interesting thing for me was after we left the turn where actually the entrance to the supermarket would be, and we walked down Llanmaes Road not towards the village, but in that direction, and we got as far as the river basically, and then we looked back up to where the supermarket would be, and the effect. What struck me, and I hadn't been aware of it till then, was what a dip that was in that road coming down, and trying to imagine the view of a built supermarket, the height, as it's been said, of a standard house, really, I couldn't imagine seeing very, very much at all. We've been told that it's acceptable with the necessary changes that would come in as part of the planning application to highways. That's always a major thing for me. We've heard that the effect on the shopping centre within the town is either, I hate to say dubious, or in this case irrelevant. It's not within the sensitive area itself, and I have to say it's on the edge of a major slip road, which you would expect a retail development to want to be, and that's where it is. I'm also minded we've had 2 years, or there have been between our officers and the potential developers, 2 years of discussions. Sometimes we have to grasp the nettle. We have to actually say, do we want this or not? And to actually be given a recommendation to refuse this purely on one aspect, which I think is dubious, about the effect on a view or whatever like that. I have to say that we have been busy on this council in the last few years in developing areas in and around Llantwit, in St Athan, and further into the west of the rural Vale. These people need retail. I'm also minded, although I shouldn't say it, that the jobs will be created. The comment, by the way, is best of Wales. And yeah, it's good that you use local suppliers. Some supermarkets don't, but that's not a relevant factor for me. I like the green roof. I think that's clever. I think that's nice, and that'll add to it. And there's many a site that we've always said is by or near or approaching or encroaching on a sensitive area that proper landscaping, tree planting, and imaginative use of a building within a site can achieve and really mitigate an effect. But we're talking about a supermarket here. A supermarket has a certain look. It is of a certain size. It will have a car park and everything associated with. I have to say, if I hadn't got beaten by Councillor Champion, I'd have been seconding this motion for it to be agreed and for planning permission to be granted. And I certainly am minded. I'll listen to the rest of the debate, but at the moment I can't see any reason why we would refuse this. Thank you.
Councillor, Ian Robinson, you want to respond to that?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just because there's a couple of points of clarification and sort of before they get lost in kind of the rest of the debate. Just in respect of Councillor Williams' point, the land's not allocated for housing. It's not proposed for housing. When we receive candidate sites through the LDP process, and we publish a list of those sites, and that doesn't mean that all those sites are to be taken forward. So I just want to clarify that it's not a case of if retail doesn't happen there, housing will happen there. In terms of Councillor Champion's point, the approach here is not different fundamentally to the approach with housing. So there's an identified housing need, affordable housing need, and we try and structure that growth through the LDP. Because that need exists today, that doesn't mean we would approve a housing development in the countryside prior to the adoption of the LDP. So the LDP process is the kind of the structured approach to determining where the best locations are for that housing, and similarly with retail. So members may be familiar, maybe not, with the placemaking work recently done in St Athan, which shows the allocations, the proposed allocations there, and a retail element there. So again, that's just kind of just clarifying to members the process through which the LDP can allocate to meet retail need, and that's again a kind of a structured approach rather than a planning application in the countryside to meet an identified need or capacity at a point in time. And the reason I refer to St Athan is because the primary catchment area is beyond just Llantwit Major. So there's been a lot of discussion about kind of the position of this site sequentially relative to maybe the availability of other sites or not availability of other sites in Llantwit Major, and whether there are any other better sites closer to the centre of Llantwit Major. But I just wanted to just flag that the catchment area where the capacity has been identified is not just Llantwit Major, it is a wider catchment within the Vale of Glamorgan. So we shouldn't necessarily be seeking to only consider Llantwit Major, noting, of course, that Llantwit Major is the biggest of the settlements in that kind of area. So there you go. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks for that, Ian. I have more hands up. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, just a few points, observations, really. I mean, obviously, when we do have out-of-town supermarket developments, there sometimes is a negative aspect on the retail usage of the main town. And obviously, one of the concerns that I have is that any development that we have may have a negative impact upon the traders in the town. Now, you mentioned about sustainability is an important argument here, isn't it? I mean, we know the applicant has argued that there will be a creation of 40 jobs. That obviously we want those jobs to be full-time, regular jobs, not part-time jobs. That we want to also make sure that those jobs are sustainable, that they are long-term, they're not short-term, and that people have careers within such organisations as well. Clearly, that's not forthcoming when I asked about the question about, retention of staff and staff turnover. That wasn't answered. So that's one point I do have a concern about, is the sustainability. I think the point has been well made by Ian Robinson that, in fact, what we're asking for is for a supermarket. We're not asking for Lidl. We're looking at, it could be any supermarket that can move here, not just in the future. We can't guarantee anything in supermarket business. We can't guarantee any future in commercial businesses. But I do think we need to look at the impact upon the existing businesses that have supported the community of Clanwick Major for some considerable period of time as a factor to consider here, because I do think that that's an important point. The point about cost of living, yes, there is a low cost of market, but we are looking at supermarkets per se in its application, not Lidl. And I would also like to emphasise that. What I also would have wondered is, obviously, lots of people will go there as part of their commuting. Will we create unnecessary additional trips that perhaps are not needed? And perhaps maybe we could look at, a certain more sustainable place rather than this location. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Johnson, you want to speak?
Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll be using Welsh.
The public in the back, does anyone else need headphones for translation? As Councillor Johnson will be speaking in Welsh. Does anybody want any headphones? There we go. No. Anyone needs headphones? No? Okay. Sorry, Councillor. I think
Number of fluent Welsh speakers in the room, which is great to see. Thank you to the prior speakers. This is a complicated application, and I can understand both sides, both in favour and against. And it is also apparent that the application can be seen through a different lens if you come from Llantwit Major or if you come from the Llanmaes side. Of course, this is on the Llanmaes road side as opposed to Llantwit Major, but to all intents and purposes, as we have heard, Llantwit Major is the urban or civic area where prospective shoppers will come from. I've listened to both sides, and for me, the reasons for rejecting are insufficient. There's one point in relation to how it looks from the Llanmaes view, and from the special conservation area in Llanmaes, but for me, this does not constitute a sufficient reason for rejection. I hear the words from our officers about talking about this further in the local development plan in future, but the reality is the application is before us this evening for discussion. Housing developments in the southwest of Vale of Glamorgan has led us to the point where a supermarket is needed. I understand the arguments with regards to it not mattering which shop or supermarket it is. It is a supermarket ultimately, but the truth is, in the corridor between Roos and Wick, there are probably some 25,000 residents where there is no supermarket offering the type of choice that you would have in a place like Barry or Pen-y-Bont ar Ogur. So this does make sense. Ogmore, that was Pen-y-Bont ar Ogur. I was the fourth of the 5 members who were on site this morning. I'm the fourth one to speak in favour of the development, and the only one not to speak yet is the chair. I am concerned about our town centres across the Vale of Glamorgan. This is a cause for concern, but I'm sufficiently familiar too with Llantylt Major Town Centre, which is thriving as well. I was there after having visited the site earlier. It's some, 12, 15 minutes on foot from the centre to the proposed site. I know that there may be some level of deterioration in competition on the outskirts of the town, but that's competition, that's capitalism, that's what happens. If they want to compete, they compete. This is not an integral part of this conversation, because this is not a material planning consideration. We've had conversations in the past in relation to Pant Wilkins stables outside of Cowbridge, and the fact that the businesses there actually should be in the centre of Cowbridge. This committee has voted in favour of Aldi in East Barry, and this committee rejected on the basis of the impact on Barry Town Centre and the deterioration of Town Centre. Ironically enough, as Barry Town Centre, I would have preferred to see the Aldi in the east of the Barry, because this belongs to the people who want to shop there. As I say, some 25,000 people are situated between Roos and Wick, where this will be their local supermarket. The shops in the town centre are different. I think this is a development which will improve the lives of people living in the southwest of Vale of Glamorgan. I don't understand all the points made by Councillor William talking about the jobs or anything else. The reason that we've been asked to reject this application today is because of the impact, the rural impact, if that's the description, the correct description, for the special conservation area of Llanmaes. For me, this is not a sufficient reason to reject, and as such, I will be voting in favour of the application and against the officers today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Next speaker is Councillor Ernest.
Thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me all right? Because I was in late on the meeting.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much. Chairman, I come to this meeting as a long-established member of the council. And firstly, I'm interested in the fact that the local members are split on this application. It doesn't often happen, but it's very interesting tonight. And my good friend, Councillor Gwyn John, who we've often agreed with, and indeed we split our views from time to time, he's concerned about the application, and yet Councillor Eddy is for it. We've heard from the residents of Llanmaes, and it's not so many years since Llanmaes won Best Kept Village in the Vale of Glamorgan by virtue of its nature as a conservation area. And a lovely little village, and yet we hear it's only 50 metres away from the boundary with a proposal for a supermarket. I think, Chairman, the residents are right in this instance. They're right to be concerned. If you want to go to a supermarket, there are already several in Llantylt Major now, and it's not that far, not that long to get to quite a number of others around the Vale of Glamorgan. But more relatively, or more relevant tonight, the office report points out that the The character of the intervening land between Llanmace and the supermarket, despite some scattered development, maintains a verdant and rural appearance that is considered to represent significant contribution to the distinctiveness of the local area and to each of the respective settlements. And to this end, Chairman, it's considered the proposal would result in a significant coalescence. Coalescence means getting together, merging, between the settlements of Llantwit Major and Llantwit, which would result in the loss of a sense of openness between the two. Now, Chairman, does this planning committee go along with the policies in the Vale that try to protect the countryside, try to protect coalescence between town and town, village and village, or do we simply throw those plans out of the window when it comes to something which is slightly more everyday, such as going shopping? I think, Chairman, that the officers are right in their report, and I think the committee should be supporting our officers. We lay down policies, we expect everybody else to abide them, but when it comes to our making decisions, taking into account rural policies, the various MD policies, we needn't go through those tonight, but they are quite clear and they're there to protect the countryside, to protect development. And so I think for all of those reasons, Chairman, I will be voting against this development tonight and supporting the local people of Llanmace and possibly those in Llantwit who are concerned about the impact of a new development. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ernest. Councillor Payne, you did have your hand up. You've taken it down. Is there a reason, or did you want to intervene? Councillor Payne? She's disconnected. Right. Councillor Payne, you did have your hand up. Did you want to contribute? Apparently not. In that case, she come back on.
She's only briefly came up for a second.
Yeah. Councillor Payne, yeah, you dropped off for a second just at the end there. There was something you wanted to say? Helen, can you hear us? No, she's dropped off again. In that case, are there any other members of the committee who would like to make a comment or contribute? And ask officers if they'd like to sum up. Rob?
Yeah, certainly can, Chair. I mean, I completely understand, the visual impacts of the development are a subjective judgment in terms of the retail policies and yes, the application does note that, our retail consultants have identified that, there is potentially headroom or capacity for such development in the primary catchment area. So, I understand the kind of disagreement in terms of the visual impact and suggested reason for refusal. I would stand by those reasons for refusal. I think the landscape mitigation isn't sufficient. I think the green roof wouldn't fully mitigate the impact of such a building. But yeah, obviously, if it's a visual impact and such matters are subjective, and I understand where members are coming from. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Rob. So the motion we have before us is to approve this application that's been moved and seconded although the officer's recommendation is to refuse. So we are voting on whether to approve or not. So if you're in favour of approval, you vote yes. If you're against approval, you vote no, or whatever it is at home, or you abstain. Can you start the vote? Vote started. What's abstain?
Recorded vote the members of ASFO.
If you want.
Should come up now.
Chair.
Sorry,
I
can you
couldn't quite
repeat that?
repeat that. I couldn't hear. It's not very clear what you just said.
Right.
No.
To be honest, Chair.
We're voting on the motion put forward by Councillor Williams to approve, which is against officers' recommendations. If you are for approval, you vote yes. If you're against approval, you vote no or you abstain. So right, there are 16 votes in, and that application is approved. Yep, it needs to come. The application will need to come back then with recommendations for officers. What do they call them? Conditions. That's it. They're the words. Yeah. So the application will have to come back to us again for to approve conditions. So that's for officers to sort out over the next few weeks. Thank you very much for that. Moving on. Just let the gallery clear. Make sure you've got your headsets and things.
Colleague will let you up now. Go. So let's come back then. Chair, obviously, because it's not approved in the sense, you need the conditions in order to approve it, so let's come back. But yeah.
I usually get the conditions with it, but we didn't this time.
No, I guess because it was a flat out refusal, they won't believe that
But still, it's a lesson learned.
Rob, George, if you follow my colleague, he'll let you all out now, okay? Okay. Okay, thank you.
Good evening. Right, moving on. Councillor Wilson, you have your hand up.
Yeah, it's just a question on the previous matter. You did say at the end that it would have to come back to this committee for
the officers
determination.
Yeah, the officers need to draw up conditions as normal, and so it'll have to come back to us with those conditions for our approval of the conditions.
Thank you very much.
Okay, that clear? Right, moving on. We come on to the next item on the agenda, which is land at St George's 2023-01161 full, land west of Drope Road, St George's Super Ely, and I believe, Steve, you're presenting this.
Oh, I am, Chair. Thank you very much. Could I just have the slides up, please? Just wait for slides. So
just bear with us a minute, Steve. We're just getting them set up. My colleague's just dealing with the people that have just left. He'll be doing the slides now. Or are you doing them, Ian? It's Ian. He's just setting it up now. Bear with us, Steve. If you want them now, we'll put them up now, Steve.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so the application site relates to an agricultural field to northwest of the settlement of Drope. Hopefully you can see it when the plans come up. A former railway line previously cut through the site, which was filled some time ago. In policy terms, the site lies outside of any settlement boundary and is located within the countryside. It is also located within the Ely Valley and Ridge Slopes Special Landscape Area. Council records indicate that the land itself is predicted agricultural land grade 2, which is categorised as good quality agricultural land. The site itself is located outside of, but adjacent to the Drope Conservation Area, which is shown in green on your plan. Okay, so in terms of the development itself, this is a full planning application for the importation and spreading of inert material, which comprises of topsoil and subsoil, in order to raise the soil levels to assist with land husbandry. So following initial plans being submitted, there were a few inconsistencies and inaccuracies. We've now received amended plans. So the plan in front of you is a sort of a contour plan and sections through. That shows existing levels at the site. So the whole purpose of this application is we've been advised that prior to application coming in and a number of years ago, waste material had been deposited on the land. This has caused a number of issues with rock beneath the surface interfering and causing problem with cultivation of equipment. It also prevents a proper and efficient drainage of the land. The material can restrict the root growth of certain crops and its ability to penetrate deep enough into the soil. And the shallow soil limits the growing medium for crops, meaning the ability of crops to take up the nutrients can be compromised. So that plan in front of you, if you look at the northern part of the site, there's a bund that's been created from the more recently imported material, and there's also a higher sort of spot level to the south. So the application is effectively, as I said, it's to import material. So if we can go to the next slide. I think that shows the proposed finish levels. So they're proposing to import some 6,200 tonnes of inert soil and material, which is been identified as coming from St Mellons Church in Wales Primary School, Llanrumney in Cardiff. The method statement details that a large lorry would be used to transport the material from St Mellons, and a haulage route has been provided. In terms of the number of trips of lorries, it'll be identified as being 15 lorries per day, which will be between the hours of 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. and not on weekends. And it's estimated that this work will take approximately 3 weeks. As part of that development, a 13-ton excavator would be provided on the site in order to spread the soil once deposited. It's unfortunate we can't see the final plan, but the next plan down shows the finished levels and sections. So here we go. So what's happening there really is the existing high points and the bund across the top of the site will be levelled. So the existing material on site will be recontoured, and then the new topsoil imported will be sort of spread on top of that. The whole idea is to create more of a level, usable field. As you can see, it kind of feathers away at the edges. So at the moment, I think the highest point's about 1.4 metres above the former ground level. When the works have been finished here to sort of consolidate and sort of level off the site a bit more, they'll be about 1.2 above ground level. So just in terms of sort of consultee responses, again, I think it's been identified that there are actually drainage issues on the land, which is preventing agricultural use. So the additional material, again, would add depth to improve drainage and also allow better growth for crops. As such, from a planning point of view, the principle of development to improve agricultural quality of land which is already identified as being high quality is considered acceptable. In relation to potential contamination, no objections have been received from Council's Environmental Health section. The two sources of soil material identified to be imported, of course, one, in terms of the existing material already imported, that has now been tested, and a report has been submitted detailing that it is free of contamination. The Council Environmental Health team has stated that that material is acceptable. So in terms of the some material to be imported, again, that's been tested. We have got a condition that provides a scenario where if the identified material to be brought in is not what has been identified, that would have to be retested. Just in relation to concerns raised about flooding, we are aware of some flood events on adjacent roads, and this is actually the point of a matters rising note submitted by Councillor Perry on the matter. The council's drainage section have identified that there is runoff from the field and indeed other fields in the area, which is partially responsible for this flooding. They identified that the drainage works have been carried out to the highway, which could potentially prevent any future flooding issues. They also advised that a drainage strategy for the site should be implemented to prevent runoff from the field, again, which is subject to another condition. Just turning to impact on residential properties, no objections have been received as a result of the public consultation. Again, the main impact really, from our point of view, it would be the kind of construction phase and the infilling works and the traffic movements. So a condition requiring lorry movements and on-site working to be restricted to daytime during the working week is necessary. It's also necessary to secure wheel washing. So with respect to green infrastructure, no trees or hedgerows would be removed as part of the works. As you can see from the photo there, there's a very nice mature tree in the middle of the site. Obviously, there's a requirement for that to be protected as part of the landscaping scheme. The idea is that the field would be restored to grassland, to agricultural grassland, and also some tree planting. Again, this would be beneficial for rural character to the area and also provide a net biodiversity gain. No objections have been raised by the council's highway section, again, subject to the provision of wheel washing facilities. So just to summarise, taking all of the above into account, the agricultural need identified for the infilling submitted by the applicants, we feel that the impacts of the proposals would be acceptable and would accord with both local and national planning policies, and as such, the proposal is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Rob. Councillor Perry, I see your hand is up, but unless this is a point of order, then you're out of order. We have a speaker on this before councillors speak. I assume this is not a point of order. In that case, we come to our speakers. I've lost my speaker list. Right, our speaker, Mr. Charlie Thomas, who is the applicant.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. I am the applicant, Charlie Thomas, a local farmer seeking to improve the agricultural quality of a small area of land subject to this planning application. The purpose of the application is to level the area, prevent a sunken, poorly drained area, and to increase the level of productive soils above the existing hard-to-manage ground, which limits the efficient cultivation of land. Part of the application is retrospective, as we had begun the soil importation prior to realising permission was required. The soil import has the relevant paperwork as shared with the local authority and is clean and inert material. I have suffered fly tip into this land that I have cleared at my own expense. Soil testing has been undertaken under a scope agreed with the local authority, the results of which confirm there are no contamination concerns. Gates have been resecured in order to prevent this fly tipping in the future. An engineering statement that has been provided at the request of the local authority and confirms the increased depth of granular soil will in itself reduce the amount of overland runoff towards Stroke Road, and no land drainage is recommended in this context. A method statement has been provided in terms of the amount of soil import, type, frequency and route of lorries to bring in the material, and how the material will be spread on site and vehicles' wheels washed, and the local road network respected during this import. The green infrastructure and biodiversity net gain information submitted show there is net gain appropriate to the scale of this proposal, with the planting of 2 hawthorn saplings and 2 beech saplings in a fenced area. Given the above, I see no material harm that has or will be caused by the importation of the inert soil to this location to assist with the local farming of arable crops and livestock, and therefore respectfully ask you to approve this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Are there any points of clarification for Mr. Thomas? in the room, and I see no hands. In that case, thank you very much, Mr. Thomas. Moving on then to general debate. And I don't think the officer has anything to add to what Mr. Thomas has said. So, Councillor Perry, as a local member, you could. No, we can't hear you.
Sorry, there's more buttons than I thought. All right, sorry about that. Yes, so this has been going on. It's brought to my attention by some residents. Obviously, huge concerns regarding the flooding of the nearby roads, which still do flood. So the works there need to be further enhanced. Congratulations to the applicant for not going grey through this. And the amount of work that's gone into this is phenomenal. It's probably one of the most complex things to do is look at land slopes. And I've not heard anything from residents recently. Obviously, there were a lot of concerns at first. So I'd be happy to propose that we approve this planning application.
Moving support for officers' recommendations. Thank you. Do we have a second for that? Everyone? Is there anyone opposed? Councillor Bruce.
Sorry, I wasn't opposed. I was seconding.
Okay, thank you.
I missed that. That was too slow.
Too slow, too slow. Anyone else want to speak on this? The general mood, I think, is in favour. I see no opposition. Therefore, the officer's recommendations are approved. Yeah, we'll just give the speaker a chance to leave the building. Maybe it'd be opportune to take a 5-minute break now for ablutions or fags or whatever you do. So come back at 17:42. Right, settle down. Right, the recording's back on. Hopefully everyone's back in the room and is able to hear the discussion on the next item, which is being brought as an emergency item, which is relating to Model Farm. Who's presenting on this, Ian? No, who is it? Rob. Oh yeah, Rob. You're presenting on this. It's part one now, and we'll move to part two in a bit. Rob, are you there? Are they in? Rob and Annabelle. Are they with us?
Robert, we need Robert Chichester to join or Annabelle to join initially. If you press the button at the bottom of your screen, that's the. Oh, there we are, Robert. Can we just check your audio, please?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, we can. Okay, would you like to present them, please, Rob?
Good afternoon, members. Members will be aware that on the 29th of March 2023, the authority were notified that the applicants had submitted an appeal against non-determination. The formal submission of the appeal against non-determination removed the authority's ability to make any formal decision on the application, as the application was now within the jurisdiction of Planning and Environment Decision Wales PEDU. On the 18th of May 2023, a special planning committee was held to provide members with an update on the status of the planning application. The motion in support of defending the authority was passed, and further to the discussions on the application at Planning Committee on the 1st of March and the 18th of May 2023, two punitive reasons for refusal were agreed. Confirmation of the validation of the appeal was received by the authority on the 11th of November 2024. The Planning and Environment Decisions Wales, PEDU, have confirmed the appeal is to be determined on the basis of a public inquiry, which is to be held between the 1st and 4th of April 2025, with closing statement session on the 8th of April. The appeal was due to be determined by the inspector. However, the Welsh ministers have subsequently considered that the appeals should be determined by themselves. Whilst the inquiry will follow a traditional procedure, namely legal representations presenting cases and calling and questioning expert witnesses, this means that instead of writing a decision at the end of the proceedings, the inspector will prepare a report which will be forwarded to the Welsh ministers for ultimately their decision to approve or dismiss the appeal. The reason for this direction is that the proposed development is for a major development which could have wide effects beyond their immediate locality. Following the validation of the appeal and subsequent review of the submitted appeal documents by the agents on behalf of Legal and General, it is apparent that the appeal documents now include new evidence which is considered material to the determination of this appeal. The new evidence, in the form of an environmental statement, was requested by PEDU. The environmental statement supersedes the original statements dated July 2019 and subsequent addendum in April 2021. The aim of the updated environmental statement is to provide PEDU, when determining the planning appeal, with sufficient information to allow it to properly assess the likely significant environmental effects of the scheme. The Council have submitted their statement of case prior to the deadline of the 9th of December, which briefly outlined the application timeline, reason the Council did not make a formal decision, and the decision the Council would have made had they had the opportunity. The Council have the opportunity to provide final comments by the 23rd of December 2024, followed by a full written statement of evidence and agreed statement of common grounds within 4 weeks of the start of the inquiry. Today's urgent item has been called by the Chairman to update members on the status of the appeal and subsequently discuss the merits of the new evidence submitted and whether this changes the Council's position when providing final comments on the appeal to PEDU. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. I move part two. That's seconded. We'll move to part two. Can you please cut off the live stream?
We'll do that now, Chair. Can we just check any non-committee members come off the meeting now for this part of the part two session, please? No, there's none actually, Chair. So we'll go on into part two shortly. We'll let you know once that's done. bear with us a second.
Mhm. Okay, so we're back on part one. Everybody, just to inform anybody who might be interested, might still be following the stream, that the discussion under part two has taken place, and the conclusion of that is that we should adjourn that part of the meeting to about a week's time, where we will where we've requested further information, and we will reconvene again under part two at that time. I believe that's the case. I see no shakes of heads. So in that case, that brings this part of the meeting to an end, and I'll see you all in a week.
I was going to say happy Christmas.